Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich begashmus beruchnis. Today we're holding Yemei Tashlumim, Isur Chag HaShavuos, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Naso. We have to discuss the connection between all these things, but we'll start as usual with Tzedakah. Hashem should help. G'dei Tzedakah Shemakrev Segula. Mashiach should come now. There should be Nitzachim in the Milchama, and Mashiach should come now. And every year should have Kol Tov Selah. We'll start with a prayer as usual, which is connected to every single one of us in a very fundamental way, and that's what we said during the Shemoneh Esrei of the Shalosh Hagolim. Ato ato v'chartonu mikol ha'amim. Ahavta yisonu v'ratzisa banu v'reimantonu mikol ha'alshenes v'kidashtonu mitzisecho v'kiravtonu malkeinu v'avidasecho v'shimcha godli v'akodesh aleinu koroso. You have chosen us from among all the nations. You have loved us and found favor with us. You have raised us above all tongues and made us holy through your commandments. So, you have raised us above all tongues. We could say that in these words, and you sanctified us with your mitzvahs, in these words we could say is also the meaning of the verse that we say concerning Matan Torah, when Hashem says, "V'atem tiyu li mamlechas kohanim v'goy kodesh." You should be a kingdom of priests, a kingdom of ministers, and a holy nation. So today we're going to focus in Mr. Hashem on this nation of kings. But first, let's talk about the Parshas Shavua, and then we'll go back to this mamlechas kohanim. It's so amazing that in this week's Parsha and last week's Parsha was Bamidbar, and we started the Sefer Bamidbar, and this week's Parsha is Parshas Naso. But in the beginning of both Parshas Bamidbar and Parshas Naso are very similar, and they both start with taking a census. And we spoke last week that the word Bamidbar we use for counting, even though the literal translation of the word Bamidbar is desert. So when we speak about counting, last week the Pasuk used the word Su'u Esreish, take a census. That's the way it's translated in many translations. And then this week's Parsha, we say Naso Esreish, also translated in many translations, take a census. But literally, as some of the Rishonim speak, the words both Su'u Esreish and Naso Esreish could be translated as elevate the head, raise the head, lift up the head. So what is this meaning of counting connected to elevate the head, raise the head, lift up the head? So, Behemshich, the continuation we spoke last week, we could say that maybe one of the meanings of Naso Esreish means to look at the person as an individual. Like we said last week, that even though on the one hand, when you count, everyone only counts as a one. So that shows on the collective, how everyone's the same. But then there's how every single person brings his individualistic characteristics and talents and individuality. His uniqueness he brings to the table. He has something he has to accomplish that no one else can accomplish. And that's why the word that talks about counting, which is something that's across the entire nation, which on the one hand represents equality, we say no. Elevate the head, raise the head, lift up the head, which means it's about lifting up the person, giving him a sense of empowerment. Gawa, you got the power. We lift up the person. So that's one interpretation. That means, and by the way, the fact that last week Parsha was called Bamidbar, even though the Parsha started and began with similar words as this week's Parsha, and nevertheless this week's Parsha is called Naso, that means that this theme of Naso is more in this week's Parsha than last week's Parsha. And one reason is because this week's Parsha, this year, you can say, is post-Matan Torah, after V'rei Mamtonu. So therefore, we're all uplifted, and we reached levels of transcendence, which is only possible because of the God infusion in every single one of us as a chelik elikam imal mamish. We have special powers. But let's take it step by step. So first of all, there's one interpretation of Naso Yisroish. The person should feel uplifted. He should feel empowered. He has unbelievable potential. Every single one of us has unbelievable potential. And whenever we speak about this idea in Yiddishkeit, it's not a contradiction at all to humility. As the Rebbe spoke many times about the chosen nation, it's a schus and a choiva that go together. It's a merit, we were chosen, but at the same time, they give us an obligation. As we spoke many times, and now's not the time to get into it, the concept of a king servant, he serves the public. Public service. He's the most humble. Like we see about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe ya'onav mikol adam asher al pnei adam. So the greater in Yiddishkeit the person is, kol ha'korev korev yoser kala. The closer he is, the higher he is, he feels more humbled. So therefore we don't have a worry and a problem by saying, pick him up, elevate him, tell him you're amazing, you're special. It won't add to anything which is a contradiction to humility, because the person realizes himself that whatever talents he has, whatever he can bring to the table, whatever uniqueness he has, it's because it was given to him, because of his parents, because of his neshama, etc., as explained in the Chassidus. So he doesn't attribute his empowerment to himself. He attributes his empowerment to the Eibishter, to what he inherited, etc. That's first of all, one level of Su'u Esreish, Naso Esreish. Elevate the head. Now, in that itself, there's many levels over here. First of all, if you elevate the head, you elevate the whole body. Gufa basar eisha ozel. Everything follows the head. So if we say elevate the head, we say elevate the whole person. You're a completely different sort of person. You're a prince, etc. Number one. Number two, if we say we elevate the person, that means that this person has the power to elevate his surroundings and his day-to-day life and bring light and life, a light into the nations and a life into the world and spirituality, etc. But then, more particular, there's a Yom of Beis Sivan, where he also, before we get to that, another point is, Naso Yisroish, make the head paramount. Which means, for example, remember, Moich Shaltal Lev, as Chabad Chassidus talks about, the brain dominates the heart. You have to remember you have a head. A head represents academia, study, learning Torah, the paramount, supreme importance of Talmud Torah. So that's what it means, make the head paramount. Make the head superior. Make the head the leader. That's another interpretation of Naso Yisroish. Then there's a higher interpretation. In Hayom Yom Beis Sivan, he says that there's a level of neshama called head, which is not even the ultimate level. And it means that Naso Yisroish, even that part of neshama, which is called Roish, that also has to be elevated. And sometimes it explains that that level of Roish has to be elevated to the Etzem HaNefesh, the essence of the soul itself. And then sometimes it takes it even further, and it says that even the Etzem HaNefesh, the highest levels of your godly soul, becomes elevated through doing Torah mitzvahs on this world. When a Yid fulfills his mission of carrying through and fulfilling Hashem's mitzvahs on this planet Earth, Naso Yisroish, he elevates his head, he elevates his Etzem HaNefesh, and we reach the greatest heights of Yafa Shah Achas, B'tshuva Maisim Tevim Be'elam Hazeh, Mikol Chayom Haba. The greatest heights that a neshama reaches is by performing mitzvahs with his body on this physical world. Okay. Now, what does it all mean practically in a certain sense? These words, Naso is Reish. And as we said, V'reimam tonu, Hashem elevated us, are connected to the words which we said on Shavuos. And this is the direct connection. Today is Isser Chag Shavuos. What's the takeaway from Shavuos? And what happened on Shavuos? Many things happened. And most Sichos and Maimorim talk about the idea that it was the marriage between heaven and earth, and God comes down onto planet earth. But there's a Sicha in Chelik Yud Ches, Chag HaShavuos Beis, a phenomenal Sicha, where the Rebbe talks about the Pasuk, V'atem tiyu li mamleches koyanim v'goy kodesh, that Hashem chooses us and He says, you will be for me, unto me, a kingdom of ministers. And Rashi says over here, in Parshas Yisrael, on the words, Mamleches Koyanim, V'atem tiyu li, what does Rashi say? Sorim. Sorim means officers. Officers. Noblemen, they translated ministers. And that's why Rashi has to say over here, Sorim. Kimo da'at Omar, as it says in the Pasuk, Uvnei David Koyanim Hoyu. Now this is an amazing proof. Uvnei David, the children of David. What does David represent? David represents Keser Malchus, the family of the kings. Malchus based David. So the family of kings are called in the verse, Uvnei David Koyanim Hoyu. So it doesn't mean that they were literally Koyanim, because they don't have the Keser Kohuna. So over here we see that the Pasuk, when it says Mamleches Koyanim, a nation of royal, a kingdom of officers, which means like Uvnei David, kings. And this is what the Rebbe elaborates in the Sikh of Shavuos. He connects it to Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech, and the Baal Shem Tov, the three tzaddikim that are related to the Yom Tov of Shavuos. But we'll leave that for another time. But we'll talk about the practical implications of what he says over there, and how I believe, in my very humble opinion, that this is absolutely essential these days, right now. Tov Shin Pei Dalet. The Rebbe says, what does it mean, V'atem tiyu li mamleches koyanim? That every Yid is a king. Every Yid is a balabas of Welt. Every single Yid is on top of the world. He rules over the world. He's master of the universe. What does it mean he rules over the world? That means that the laws of nature, the laws of humanity, the laws of creation, the laws of existence do not apply to the Jewish nation. As everyone has been speaking in the last couple of months, as we say in the Haggadah, B'chol day v'doyer, Oim dim aleinu l'chaliseinu, v'akadosh baruch hu matzalenu miyodam. And the Rebbe spoke many times in the Pasuk that every single Yid is a walking miracle. I forgot the Lashon of the Haftarah. No, where it says over there that every Yid, Tilosu Yisaperu. Oh, but every single Jew, Tilosu Yisaperu, is a walking testimony and a witness to the infinity of Hashem. It makes no sense that the Jewish nation should still exist. It's amazing that we already said this more than 1,000 years ago in the Haggadah, that B'chol day v'doyer oimdim aleinu l'chaliseinu. There's always going to be those that wish to abolish us, decimate us, destroy us, annihilate us. And we're being told with a certainty, V'akadosh baruch hu matzalenu miyodam. What's the answer? There's no answer. And that's why Mark Twain, in his famous article about the Jews and on the Jews, he wrote, what is the secret of their immortality? There is an answer. The world doesn't know the answer, but we know the answer. And the answer is because Ato v'chartonu mikol ha'amim. Since Hashem chose us, Eved Melech Melech, since we serve Hashem and we connect Hashem, we get powers of Hashem. And that's why the answer, what is the secret of their immortality? The secret of the immortality of the Jewish nation is Yisrael, Eiraisa, V'kuchebericho, Kulachad. When a Yid is connected to the Torah, which is Hashem Himself, and we connect with Hashem Himself, so no power of this earth could affect a Jew or the Jewish nation. And what it means practically is that if there are ever any hindrances and obstacles to the performance of Torah mitzvahs, we have to realize that a Yid is balabas Welt. That's what it means that the Eibishter infused us and gave us this ultimate empowerment of kings. A king has a power. Oman Malka or Ketura. A king could move mountains. And we are all infused and injected with Hashem's rulership, Hashem Molech, Hashem Melech, Hashem Yimlech, Leilam Vad, and every single Yid is B'nai Malachim, V'atem Tili Mamleches Kohanim. A nation of officers, of kings. Every Yid is a king over the world. And as we said before, that obviously this does not bring any haughtiness whatsoever. It's coming out of complete humility. It's not my strength, it's Hashem's strength. And this is why everything we see about the Jews and Yiddishkeit show them this idea how the rules don't apply. Rules of existence, self-preservation, whatever you want to call it, laws of nature don't apply to the Jewish nation. For example, the pasuk that says in Shmois, "Kashi ya'anu esay kein yirbe v'chein yifritz." What's what Mishagas in this? The more you smash the Jew, and the pasuk says this, "Kashi ya'anu esay," the more you try to crush, oppress the Jews. "Kashi ya'anu esay kein yirbe v'chein yifritz." They become more powerful in direct proportion, in the direct proportion of the suffering. How much you want to destroy them, they actually become stronger. It doesn't make sense. Does not compute. How could that be? But that's what we see clearly. Unbelievable. And the same thing is about everything. We say, what do we do when we're 8 days old? We have a circumcision. The Jews make a circumcision on the 8th day, which seems to be that we're harming ourselves. On the contrary, we're the ones that are around. Read the article over there, the Babylonian, the Greek, the Romans, every single empire are in the heap, dustbin of ashes. Masha'inkin Am Yisrael Chai, no matter what. And just like Ani violation, you see, there's an union of Netzach Yisrael, because we have a special connection to the Eibishter. And by the way, the whole idea of a bris, as the Rebbe explains in the Sikha, the difference between but Yishmael had a circumcision at 13, but Yitzchak at 8 days. Naso Manishma. We have an essential bond with Hashem, which supersedes, overrides, transcends intellect. We are loyal to Hashem, and Hashem is loyal to us. And we have a special connection. Same thing when it comes to Shabbos. By the way, when you think about Shabbos, we spoke about this many times. Now in the age of distractions and devices. And when you think about that, the Eibishter Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Shabbos, He gave us a Shabbos. And the Shabbos precedes even Matan Torah. And this Shabbos gives us a power of separation, of elevation, of exaltedness. That's what it means. Melech and Shabbos, same idea. It's a level of being above and beyond the world. You could have a 2-day yontif, or a 3-day yontif, if it's 2-day yontif in the Shabbos. And a Jew connected to yontif forgets about the world completely. Doesn't make a difference what it says in Gmail. Doesn't make a difference what's going on in his phone. Doesn't make a difference when it goes on with anything. He's now connecting inwardly to his higher source. And going beyond all the limitations of the world. So we have a Shabbos. And the whole world is working on Saturday, possibly, because they believe that that day is the day where they're making more money, because everyone's going to the shopping mall on Saturday, and the Jew is closing his store on Shabbos, because he knows that his livelihood will not be affected by being closed on Shabbos. He's going to say, on the contrary, I'm going to make more money by not being open on Shabbos. And the same thing is with family. Unit, family life, Taras HaMishpacha. There comes a time of the month when Jewish couples separate to a certain degree. I'm not here to give a lesson with the laws of family purity. Does that make the marriage weaker? On the contrary, it makes it stronger and a more successful marriage. And all these things, if you're going to ask people for the logic behind it, on the one hand, they would look at it and say, it doesn't make sense. All these things we just discussed. And the answer is, on the contrary, whether it makes sense or doesn't make sense, we could explain it, but that's not the point. The point is, its origin is in something which is beyond the world, higher than the world, and preceded the world. Alpayim shodna kod moteir le'elam. Chachmosei atzm shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is Hashem himself, and he chose the Jewish nation, and he gave us those powers. Now, why am I saying that this is especially, right now, so important? Because right now, there's no other way to say it, the world is obsessed with the Yidden. Poshet obsessed. All eyes on Rafa. What does it mean, all eyes on Rafa? That the entire world should drop everything. And if you're part of the world, whether you live in Pakistan, Afghanistan, or Turkey, or Siberia, or Argentina, or Venezuela, all eyes on Rafa. Every single non-Jew of the world should take the magnifying glass and look exactly what Israel, what the Yidden are doing. Are you normal? They're suffering in Sudan, they're suffering in Syria, they're suffering in Ukraine, they're suffering here, there. That's all not important. What's important? What the Jew is doing. So the world, it just happens to be in a negative way, but the world is crying out, clearly, we're different. The entire world is screaming that we are different, and we have a double, it's hypocrisy and it's a double standard. But the fact is, the world is screaming at you and saying you're different, and therefore we're obsessed with what you do. Makes no sense whatsoever. No sense whatsoever. And that's why the anti-Semitism has come out. But what we know is, the lesson we have to take is that whenever there's a test, and the test is showing the opposite side, we have to go the opposite way. The Nasoyan of the Satan, of the Yetzer Hara, or whatever you want to call the test right now, is that the whole world is going against and coming out with crazy blood libels. Every day crazier than the other day. Completely senseless. Idiotic. Useful idiots. Call whatever you want. And what they can't stand is that a Jew should act like a Jew and have a moral compass, which is the right moral compass. It's like we represent light and everyone else is in a double darkness. Not only are they in darkness, they don't realize they're in the darkness. And the answer is, the solution is, keep on turning the light, light Shabbos candles. Wear tzitzis outside. Have your yarmulke on your head. And scream and proclaim, I'm a Jew and I'm proud. And we have to keep on screaming, I'm a Jew and I'm proud. And we have a connection to the Eibishter. We are the chosen people. And this is what it says in the good book. And the same thing, the famous Rashi, that Rashi says that he gave us Eretz Yisrael. And anyone who knows history knows the truth. And we have to keep on speaking the truth. And ultimately the truth will prevail. And this is a lesson that we have to take. Like the Pasuk says, people keep on saying we're getting isolated. Guess what? The Torah said we're already isolated. That's what the Pasuk says. And the question is, how obvious is it going to become that we're getting more and more isolated? And then the only way is to keep on saying again and again, Ato v'chartonu mikol ha'amim ahavta isonu v'rotzisa bonu v'roim amtonu. And our request to Hashem is that we should be able to strengthen ourselves and that the Eibusha should take away all hindrances and obstacles to the performance of Torah mitzvahs and Zman HaGolus. And our Isarus L'Tata, an arousal from below, should cause an arousal from above, that Hashem should take care of all the problems that are going on and make more and more miracles as the miracles of the 4 hostages that came back alive. And for that we give a Shevel V'Idol HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just as those 4 hostages came back miraculously, so too all the rest of the hostages should come back miraculously and healthy. And it should be the end of the war and the Dan Notzach. And we should come to the Geula Amitis V'Ashleima, take it from Yad Mamish. posting from my home, Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.